The fluorescent light hums over the polished table, a cold white sound in the otherwise silent room. My hands are steady on the dark wood, palms down. Across from me, his face splits into that familiar, easy grin. The one that used to melt me, but now just feels brittle. He slides the pen across the page, a flourish I know is performative, and signs his name. Mark. The ink is black and final. He pushes the papers back, leans back in his chair, and laughs. It's a short, sharp bark, full of victory. Done, he says, looking right at me. His eyes gleam. Took long enough. My lawyer sits beside me, a still presence. She gives nothing away. She just watches him. He picks up his copy, flipping through the pages with a casual air, still chuckling to himself. It's the sound of someone who thinks he's just won the lottery, sealed the deal, walked away clean. He thinks he's stuck me with the crumbs, maybe less. He thinks I'm ruined. He thinks I'm stupid. The laughter fades. His eyes, scanning the dense legal text, slow down. His fingers stop turning the pages. The smile twitches, then freezes. His gaze fixes on a specific paragraph, half hidden on page 17. The air in the room shifts, thickens. The humming light seems louder. He reads it again. And again. His face, just moments ago flushed with smug satisfaction, starts to drain of color. From the neck up, he is rapidly becoming the shade of cheap office paper. The hand holding the document starts to tremble. He looks up at me, his eyes wide now, not with amusement, but with something like disbelief, then dawning horror. The white around his pupils is stark against the fading blue. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The pen he used to sign the papers rolls off the table and clatters onto the carpet. He doesn't seem to notice. He's staring at me as if he's never seen me before, as if I'm a ghost that just materialized out of the sterile office air. His lawyer, who has been calmly packing her briefcase, glances up, sensing the sudden shift. She looks at Mark, then at me, then back at the document in his shaking hand. He finally finds his voice, but it's thin, reedy. A strangled sound. What is this? His lawyer leans forward, takes the paper from him, her brow furrowed. She starts to read. My lawyer remains perfectly still, a statue carved from cool marble. The silence stretches, taut and unbearable. Mark is breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. His pallor deepens. His lawyer's eyes scan the page, her expression tightening with every line. She looks up, first at Mark, then at my lawyer, then finally at me. Her professional composure cracks, just slightly. The room holds its breath. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Life wasn't always this. This cold room, this thick tension, the sound of a man's world collapsing across a table from me. There was a time when his laugh didn't scrape against my nerves, when his smile felt like sunlight. We met young. Cliché, I know. In college. He was the golden boy, charming, confident, already talking about his future as if it were a guaranteed inheritance. I was quieter, more bookish, working 3 jobs to get through. He saw something in me, or maybe he just liked the contrast. He said I grounded him, kept him real. I thought he brought excitement, possibility. We built the life. Or, more accurately, he talked about building a life, and I did the heavy lifting. I finished my degree, started my career, and quietly, steadily built a foundation. He hopped from one big idea to the next, the app that would revolutionize social media, the real estate venture that was a guaranteed goldmine, the tech startup that just needed seed funding. They all crashed and burned, one after another, leaving a trail of debt in their wake. He called it investing in our future, I called it reckless spending. But he was so good at convincing me, at painting the picture of the payoff, the lavish life we'd have someday. And I loved him. Or I thought I did. Love makes you blind. Love makes you make excuses. Love makes you sign loan documents you don't fully understand because he promises to handle it. It's just temporary, a stepping stone. The debt grew like a weed, thick and fast, wrapping around our lives. Credit cards maxed out for business expenses that looked suspiciously like lavish dinners and designer suits. Loans taken out against assets we barely owned. Lines of credit opened and drained dry. He was always so optimistic, so sure the next big thing would hit, erase it all, make us rich. My steady paycheck, my careful savings, they were swallowed whole, just keeping us afloat, paying the minimums, keeping the wolves from the door. He saw my money as a safety net, a resource to be tapped whenever his latest scheme went south. My career, the one I'd worked so hard for, became less about my own growth and more about maintaining the lifestyle he felt entitled to. The house, the cars, the vacations, they were built on a foundation of quicksand and my quiet desperation. I tried to talk to him. I tried to make budgets, to suggest cutting back, to ask where the money was really going. He'd charm me, deflect, get angry. "You don't understand business," he'd say, or "You're not trusting me." He'd make me feel small, provincial, scared of success. He isolated me, subtly, from friends who questioned his habits, from family who saw the strain on my face. My world shrank until it was just him, his dreams, and the rising tide of our debt. I started keeping secrets. Not big ones at first. Just squirreling away a little bit of my own money in a separate account he didn't know about. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. It felt like burying acorns for a winter I knew was coming. It was a tiny act of rebellion, a lifeline I was weaving thread by thread. The end, when it came, wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a slow, cold fade. He became more distant, more secretive. The late nights weren't spent working on his ventures anymore. There were hushed phone calls, excuses I didn't believe, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Then one Tuesday morning over burnt coffee, he just said it. Casual, like discussing the weather. "I think we should get a divorce." No emotion, no explanation, just that flat statement. He already looked checked out, already gone. He probably expected tears, hysterics, begging. He got none of it. A strange calm settled over me. The weight of years of anxiety, of pretending, of trying to keep us afloat, suddenly felt lighter, replaced by an icy clarity. "Okay," I said. That was it. Just, okay. He seemed surprised. Annoyed even. He wanted drama. He wanted to be the one walking away from a mess, leaving me to clean it up. My quiet acceptance robbed him of a scene. That's when his arrogance kicked into overdrive. He assumed, naturally, that I would be devastated, lost, incapable of handling anything. He assumed he would get everything he wanted, maybe the house, certainly keeping his car, and leaving me with the mess, with the debt. He hired a sharp, aggressive lawyer. I found mine through a quiet recommendation from a colleague. Sarah wasn't loud or flashy, but her eyes held a steady intelligence, and she listened. Really listened. The initial settlement offers from his side were insulting. They proposed he keep the majority of the assets, minimal spousal support for me, and, crucially, that the marital debt be divided equally. 50-50. Half of the mountain of debt he had accrued through his failed ventures, his reckless spending, his secret life. Half of the bills I'd been secretly paying just to keep the electricity on. Half of the loans taken out for ventures I never believed in, for a lifestyle he enjoyed while I worried. He expected me to fight him on the assets, maybe on the support. He expected me to crumble under the weight of the debt, to agree to anything to make it stop. He didn't understand that the debt was the real battleground. It wasn't just money. It was the physical manifestation of years of lies, manipulation, and control. The debt was him. And he was trying to saddle me with half of himself. That was the inciting incident that truly set the course. Not the divorce itself, but his casual cruelty, his assumption that he could just walk away from the financial wreckage he created, leaving me buried under it. That's when the cold clarity turned into a burning resolve. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make him own every single cent he owed. The early struggles were exactly what he expected. Dealing with lawyers, understanding the legal jargon, the endless paperwork. Trying to track down every credit card statement, every loan document. It was overwhelming. He was making it difficult, delaying disclosure, playing games. His lawyer sent increasingly aggressive letters, demanding responses, threatening court action. Meanwhile, the real world didn't stop. Bills kept arriving. The small amount of money I'd managed to hide away was dwindling faster than I anticipated, swallowed by legal fees and everyday expenses. I had to take on extra work, long hours that left me exhausted, and with little time to focus on the divorce strategy. He seemed to be enjoying it. Sarah heard from his lawyer that he was telling everyone how difficult I was being, how I was dragging things out, how I was just bitter. He was already spinning the narrative, painting himself as the victim of a spiteful ex-wife. The debt felt like a physical weight. It pressed down on me, made it hard to breathe. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the numbers swirling in my head. The minimum payments, the interest rates, the total sum that seemed impossible to ever repay. Half of that was still an insurmountable mountain for me alone. It was the debt that felt like the real threat, the thing that could break me, trap me forever in the wreckage of our marriage. Sarah was pragmatic. She explained the law, the precedents. Marital debt is typically divided equitably, not always equally, but usually aiming for fair distribution based on who benefited and who has the ability to pay. But proving who benefited from his secret spending, from his failed ventures, was hard. Money is fungible. Once it's spent, tracing its exact path is difficult, often impossible. He claimed the debt was for joint living expenses or investments in our shared future. He had just enough documentation, or had destroyed enough, to make his claims seem plausible on paper. He was good at this. He'd been practicing deception for years. There were days I felt completely defeated. Sitting in Sarah's office, going over the numbers, the debt felt like a physical entity in the room with us, a monstrous third party in the divorce, looming over my future. Sarah would talk about strategy, about negotiating leverage, but it all felt abstract compared to the cold, hard figures on the spreadsheets. My secret savings were almost gone. I was borrowing money from my sister, feeling a fresh wave of shame. Every time I saw something that reminded me of him, an expensive car, a fancy restaurant, a piece of technology, I knew it was probably bought with money we didn't have, money that was now part of the mountain I was expected to carry. The injustice burned, a slow, simmering fire beneath the ice of my despair. I started to wonder if he was right. Maybe I was too weak, too naive, too buried under the weight of it all. Maybe I should just accept his insulting offer, take the half of the debt, and spend the next 20 years trying to dig myself out. The thought was a poison, making everything feel pointless. The deepening crisis wasn't just financial, it was existential. It was about whether I had the strength to fight for my future, or if I was doomed to be defined by the past he had built for us, or rather, for himself. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, sitting alone in the quiet house that felt too big, too empty, and too full of ghosts, I was going through boxes of old paperwork. Not divorce stuff, just life stuff. Tax returns, utility bills, old bank statements from years ago. Things he'd told me to file away and forget about. He was always the one who handled the important papers, the investments, the complicated stuff. I found a box specifically labeled Mark, Business. Inside were folders, chronologically organized by year. I didn't know why I was looking, maybe just putting off dealing with the present. I pulled out a folder from about 5 years back, around the time he was obsessed with that social media app idea. Mixed in with pitch decks and business plans were bank statements for an account I didn't recognize. It was in his name only. It wasn't the joint account we used for household expenses or the savings account I knew about. This was different. There were large transfers from our joint accounts and large withdrawals, labeled only as business expenses, but there were also deposits. Irregular deposits. And payments to things that had nothing to do with business. High-end hotels. Flights to places he'd gone on business trips alone. Payments to a woman's name I didn't know. It hit me, not like a lightning bolt, but like a slow, cold seep. This account wasn't for business investments. It was for his secret life. The affairs, the travel, the expenses he couldn't run through a joint account without me seeing. The business trips where he was supposedly networking were actually trysts. And the debt? A significant portion of the marital debt he was so eager to share wasn't for our future, it was funding this. This secret life, this deception. My hands trembled as I went through more folders, more years. The pattern was undeniable. Money siphoned off, credit cards maxed out for these hidden expenses, loans taken out to cover the tracks when the spending outpaced even his hidden funds. The mountain of debt wasn't just reckless ambition gone wrong. It was built, in large part, on a foundation of betrayal. That's when the despair lifted, replaced by a cold, clear anger. Not the hot, messy kind, but the kind that hardens into purpose. He hadn't just wasted our money. He had stolen my financial security, built his lies with funds meant for our shared life, and then expected me to pay for half of it. This wasn't just divorce. This was exposing a fraud. I took the box to Sarah. She listened patiently as I explained what I'd found, my voice shaking slightly at first, then growing steadier as I laid out the evidence. I showed her the statements, the transfers, the payments to the unknown names, the travel dates coinciding with his business trips. She examined the documents carefully, her expression unreadable at first. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. Not a warm smile, but a sharp, strategic one. "This changes things," she said quietly. "Significantly." She explained that debt accrued for one spouse's sole benefit, especially if hidden or related to activities detrimental to the marriage like infidelity, which can sometimes be a factor in property division, depending on the state's laws, but the financial trail is the strongest evidence, can be assigned disproportionately to that spouse. The legal term was dissipation of marital assets or fraudulent conveyance. He hadn't just accumulated debt, he had dissipated marital funds, often through deceit, and much of the debt was a direct result of covering up that dissipation. The debt he wanted to saddle me with wasn't just our problem. It was his problem, magnified by lies. This was the midpoint shift. I wasn't just defending myself against his claims anymore. I was going on the offensive. The debt, the very thing he thought was his strongest weapon against me, was about to become his undoing. The turning point was deciding to go all in. Sarah laid out the strategy. It would be aggressive. It would require meticulous documentation, expert testimony, and potentially a lengthy court battle if he didn't settle. We would need to forensically trace the funds, link the debt to his secret spending, and prove he concealed it. It wouldn't be easy. He would fight back, lie, deny. But I felt a strength I hadn't known I possessed. Years of being invisible, of being walked over, of watching him prioritize his own desires and deceptions over our shared life, it all culminated in this single, fierce determination. I wouldn't just survive. I would be vindicated. He wouldn't just share the debt. He would own it. All of it. Every single cent tied to his lies and his secret life. "Let's do it," I told Sarah. My voice was steady, resolute. Whatever it takes. The next few months were a blur of work. We hired a forensic accountant. I spent hours poring over spreadsheets, cross-referencing dates, transactions, names. The anger I felt wasn't loud or volatile. It was cold, focused energy. Every number I traced, every discrepancy I found, felt like another brick in the wall I was building around him. He, meanwhile, remained oblivious. His lawyer was pushing for settlement, confident that I was weak and running out of resources. Mark probably thought I was just delaying the inevitable, trying to squeeze a few more dollars out of him. He continued his life, seemingly unconcerned, probably racking up more debt. He was so caught up in his own narrative, his own sense of entitlement, that he couldn't see the trap being laid. We compiled a mountain of evidence. The forensic accountant's report was damning, detailing the flow of funds, the clear pattern of dissipation, the loans taken out specifically to cover spending unrelated to marital purposes. We had documentation linking specific credit card charges and bank withdrawals to his travel dates, to expenses incurred by the women he was seeing, to investments that were clearly in his name alone and never benefited our joint finances. Sarah drafted the settlement proposal. It was significantly different from his initial offer. It proposed a fair division of the legitimate marital assets, which were few, thanks to his habits, Minimal spousal support, I was capable of supporting myself once the debt wasn't crushing me, and a clause regarding the debt. This clause detailed the specific debts identified as resulting from his dissipation of assets and requested they be assigned solely to him. It cited the evidence, the account statements, the forensic report. His lawyer received the proposal and, presumably, reviewed it. There were phone calls, emails. Their tone shifted from aggressive confidence to confusion, then concern. They hadn't expected this. They had expected me to negotiate based on asset division, not weaponize the debt itself. Sarah kept me informed, but she also shielded me from the back and forth. My job was done for now. The evidence was compiled. The strategy was set. The waiting was the hardest part. I knew Mark. I knew he wouldn't believe it was serious until it was undeniable. He would dismiss it as a bluff, a desperate attempt to scare him. The day of the signing arrived. It was scheduled as a final settlement conference. One last chance to avoid court. I dressed carefully, a simple, professional dress that felt like armor. I wanted to project quiet strength, not vulnerability. Walking into the conference room felt surreal. This was it. The culmination of years of quiet struggle, of watching, of learning, of planning. Mark was already there, looking relaxed, impeccably dressed. He gave me a condescending smile, a look that said, "Let's just get this over with." His lawyer looked less confident than usual, a subtle tension around her eyes. We sat down. The lawyers did the talking at first, going over the standard clauses, the asset division, which was minimal and mostly agreed upon by this point. Mark was visibly bored, eager to get to the signing. He kept glancing at his watch. Then they got to the financial section. The debt. Sarah's voice was calm and clear as she explained the proposal regarding the allocation of liabilities. She didn't dwell on the details, just presented the clause and the supporting evidence binder that had been provided to their side beforehand. Mark wasn't really listening. He was already reaching for the pen, the divorce papers laid out before him. He just wanted it done. He probably assumed the debt clause was boilerplate, something he'd deal with later, argue about if needed. He picked up the pen, that same expensive, weighted pen he always used. He signed. His signature, large and confident. He pushed the papers back, leaned back, and let out that laugh. The one I'd heard at the beginning. Triumphant. Derisive. Done, he'd said, his voice full of self-satisfaction. Took long enough. And then he picked up his copy. And he read. The blood drains from his face, replaced by that ghastly pallor. His eyes fix on the page. The laughter dies. His mouth opens, hangs slightly agape. The paper trembles in his hand. His lawyer, who had been trying to signal him subtly with her eyes, sighs, a small, inaudible sound of resignation. She knew this was coming. She'd probably warned him, but he hadn't listened. He never listened. Mark's lawyer takes the papers from him, her expression now openly grim. She reads the clause again, quickly. She flips to the back, where the summary of assigned debts is listed, category by category, amount by amount, linked to the exhibits in the binder. The numbers are staggering. Far more than he had probably ever acknowledged, even to himself. What is this? He whispers, his voice hoarse. His lawyer looks at him. It's the debt allocation, Mark. Based on the evidence presented regarding dissipation of marital assets. Dissipation. He barks the word, trying to inject his usual bluster, but it fails. It sounds like a scared little boy. What are you talking about? That's marital debt. Ours. My lawyer speaks, her voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. The court considers debt accrued for purposes outside the marital unit, particularly when concealed, as the sole responsibility of the party who accrued it. We have provided extensive documentation, including bank records and a forensic accounting report, demonstrating that a significant portion of the liabilities listed were incurred for expenses unrelated to the marital partnership, including personal travel and other relationships, and were actively concealed. She gestures to the binder. The exhibits are all there. 5 years of bank statements, credit card records, travel manifests, the accountant's analysis linking specific expenditures to specific loans and credit lines. Mark stares at the binder, as if it's a ticking bomb. He looks back at me, his eyes narrowed, full of sudden, venomous hatred. You went through my things. I meet his gaze steadily. I went through our things, Mark. Things you told me to file away and forget. You tricked me, he yells, slamming his hand on the table. The pens jump. His lawyer flinches. You put that in after I signed. No, Sarah says calmly, her voice cutting through his bluster. The proposed settlement, including the debt allocation clause and the attached exhibits, was provided to your counsel 2 weeks ago for review. You had ample opportunity to read it, review the evidence, and discuss it with your lawyer before signing. Your signature indicates you have read and agree to all terms. His lawyer nods, confirming Sarah's statement with a tight-lipped expression. She doesn't meet his eyes. She knows he screwed up. He was too arrogant to read the details, too confident that I had no leverage, that I would just roll over. He skimmed, saw what he expected to see, asset division, minimal support, and signed without reading the fine print that detailed his financial ruin. This isn't fair, he shouts, standing up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. It hits the wall with a thud. You can't do this. This is impossible. It's not only possible, Mark, Sarah says, her voice still level. It is legally sound, supported by compelling evidence, and has been signed by both parties. He stands there, his face a mask of shock and rage, breathing hard. He looks from Sarah to his lawyer, who is avoiding his gaze, then to me. The cold satisfaction I felt is mixed with a strange emptiness. This wasn't just about winning, it was about years of pain finding release in this single, devastating moment for him. We'll fight this, he screams, turning to his lawyer. This is coercion. This is fraud. His lawyer finally looks at him, her expression weary. Mark, you signed the agreement. We received the documentation weeks ago. There's no basis for coercion or fraud. You had the information. But the debt, that's over $500,000. His voice cracks on the number. I almost smile. $500,000 was just the principal. With interest, penalties, and the years of struggle ahead, it was much, much more. It was the mountain he had built, brick by brick, lie by lie. And now he had to carry it alone. He collapses back into his chair, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. He looks broken. The golden boy, the confident schemer, reduced to a pale, trembling mess. He signed his own financial death warrant, laughing as he did it. His lawyer started talking quietly to him, explaining the reality, the impossibility of overturning a signed agreement based on his failure to read it. She pointed out the strength of our evidence, the forensic report that was devastatingly thorough. The room settled back into a tense quiet, broken only by Mark's ragged breathing and his lawyer's low, urgent whispers. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching him. The years of anxiety, of fear, of feeling powerless, they weren't erased, but the crushing weight was gone. It had been transferred, legally and irrevocably, back to the person who had created it. The immediate aftermath in that room was tense and surreal. Mark was in shock, sputtering between denial and fury. His lawyer, clearly mortified and frustrated with her client's hubris, tried damage control, speaking in low, urgent tones. She tried to argue technicalities, to imply I had somehow misled him, but Sarah shut it down calmly and effectively, referencing specific dates the settlement was delivered and his counsel's written acknowledgement of receipt. There was no legal ground for him to stand on. He had signed. He finally stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving his lawyer to gather his papers and offer me and Sarah a tight-lipped apology for his behavior. It was a pathetic exit, not the triumphant stride he had envisioned. Walking out of that office building felt like shedding a skin. The air outside seemed fresher, the sky bluer, even though it was a gray, overcast day. The weight that had pressed down on me for years had lifted. It wasn't just the debt, it was the constant anxiety, the feeling of being controlled, of being fundamentally unsafe in my own life because my financial security was tied to his recklessness and deceit. The practical reality for Mark hit quickly, I heard. The creditors he had been juggling began demanding payment. Without my income, without the ability to open new lines of credit in a divorcee's name, he couldn't maintain the illusion. The debts he thought he could simply walk away from, or share with me, were now solely his responsibility. The loans tied to his failed ventures, the credit cards maxed out on his secret life, they all came crashing down. His attempts to fight the settlement were futile. His lawyer, perhaps recognizing a losing battle or simply unwilling to deal with his irrationality, withdrew. He hired a new lawyer, less reputable, who filed motions that were quickly dismissed based on the signed agreement and the irrefutable evidence we had presented. He was trapped in the legal framework he had scoffed at. I didn't gloat, not openly. The satisfaction was deep and quiet, a cold knowing that justice, in this case, had been served. It wasn't revenge, not in the fiery sense. It was restoration. It was reclaiming my future from the wreckage he had made of our past. Rebuilding my life wasn't instantaneous or easy. The emotional toll of the marriage and the divorce was significant. There was still residual debt, smaller amounts that were genuinely joint expenses or things I had willingly taken responsibility for, but it was manageable. For the first time in years, I could see a path forward, a future where my hard work benefited me, where my savings were in stability, not just a leaky bucket. I sold the house, too big and too full of memories. I downsized, simplified. I focused on my career, on building a community of friends who saw and valued me for who I was, not for the facade I helped maintain. I heard snippets about Mark's life through mutual acquaintances, the ones who hadn't been fully taken in by his charm. His ventures collapsed entirely. He lost his car. He had to move into a small, rented apartment. The debt collectors were relentless. The $500,000, perhaps a manageable sum for a genuinely successful businessman, was a crippling weight for someone whose success was built on smoke and mirrors and borrowed money. The irony was sharp. He was forced to live the diminished life he had so arrogantly assumed would be mine. He tried to contact me once, months later. A rambling email, alternating between anger and a bizarre attempt at reconciliation, painting himself as the wronged party. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He was a chapter closed, a lesson learned, an escape made. The debt wasn't just a financial burden. It was a symbol of how little he valued me, how easily he would have sacrificed my future for his own convenience and deceit. Winning that fight wasn't about money in the bank. It was about asserting my worth, my strength, my right to a future unburdened by his lies. The laughter he gave in that office, so full of confidence and cruelty, turned out to be the sound of him sealing his own fate. He signed his name, oblivious, and walked directly into the trap he never saw coming. He thought he was free, laughing at the mess he left behind. But the mess, the mountain of debt, walked out of that room with him, chained to his ankle. And he'll be carrying it for a very long time. It was a cold win, a silent victory. No cheering, no fanfare. Just the quiet, profound relief of standing, finally, on solid ground. The ground I built myself, brick by careful brick, out of the wreckage he left behind. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.